Good morning, everybody, from lovely and sunny Gilbert, Arizona. And today we're going to talk about two of Peyton's favorite people in the world, Rhett and Link. Lotso is probably the third one, and maybe The Rock after that. But today we want to talk about Rhett and Link because there's an article that just came out about how Rhett and Link broke up with Jesus. And on their podcast, Ear Biscuits, they talk about having grown up in evangelical Christianity and going through a deconstruction process. Now, normally here on Church Without Walls, I like to focus on celebrating Jesus and talking about Jesus. Although Wendy and I have started a ministry to people just like Rhett and Link called The Sparrow's Call. It's adopted the Tolkien motto, not all who wander are lost. And so there's going to be some bleed over today. We're going to bleed over into that area to give hope to people who are questioning or who are doubting, or to those who love them. And also to give advice to those who are around people like that, who are going through deconstruction or reconstruction, or simply they've been damaged by the church or by a denomination or systematic theology or the Christian faith. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And I'm going to tell you, I think, why I believe that Rhett and Link are closer to Jesus for having left Christianity. So stay around. One of the advantages of doing cyber church is you can't throw rocks at me. And if you throw rocks at your MacBook, it doesn't hurt me, sticks and stones. But trust me, stay around. I think I have a strong argument for why Rhett and Link are closer to Jesus for having left Christianity. But before I start, I want to talk to you about another person, one of my favorite people in the world. I think it's Jesus, my family, and then Darryl Davis. Darryl Davis should be a national hero. You know what? Let me share a picture of him with you. I was going to get a picture of him playing piano with Chuck Berry. Darryl Davis is a jazz musician, blues, and he's played with all the greats. But that's not why I want you to meet Darryl, not just because he's a great musician. I want you to meet him because he's got an interesting hobby. His hobby is, he happens to be a black man. So he's an African-American, born in Chicago, lives in Baltimore. And when he's not playing music, he's talking to white supremacists. He's talking to racists, mostly Ku Klux Klan members. The interesting thing about Darryl Davis is he has led over 200 people out of the Klan. And that is a remarkable feat. To lead one person out of the Klan as a black man is worth a book and a movie. But Darryl's done it for 200 people. I think he's up to in the mid-20s now about high Klan members that are ranking like officials in the Klan. I don't know what they call them, Grand Kleagles, Super Dragons, Uber, whatever. But when these guys come out of the Klan and they love Darryl as a brother, they actually give Darryl their robes. It's like tokens of fidelity or friendship. And so Darryl's going to start a museum one day and just hang up all these robes and tell the stories behind each one. But I want to show you a couple pictures of Darryl because he plays an important role today in what we're going to be talking about. Here's Darryl with one of the men he helped convert, and you might think that's strange. Here's another one of Darryl with one of the men he helped convert, and then where is it? And then here's Darryl holding a scalp, I guess you could call it, of one of the hate-filled, ignorant men that he's led out of the Klan. Now, if Darryl was a white man, this story would still be an amazing story. The fact that he's a black man who's reaching out to Klan members and having amazing success is something that we should look at and try and emulate, because he does it with love and understanding. Nothing new under the sun. It's just, it's a simple solution. It's just really hard to enact when you're talking to people who want to kill you, or who think you're the scum of the earth, or who don't mind telling you that. Now, look, for every one person Darryl has success with over time, there's probably 1,000 who just spit at him or call him names or ignore him. And yet he's done this now, I think, coming up on 40 years, and he's had great success. But I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because, you know, we like the cute little stories all wrapped up, you know, in like a sitcom amount of time, in like a half-hour time. Darryl meets ugly racist. Darryl loves and ministers to ugly racist. Ugly racist comes out and loves Darryl back. And we love that. And it's tight and it's neat. And we could write it in the Reader's Digest in 900 words. And we could put it to rest. But the truth is, the story is more complicated than that. For example, I told you, and we're going to set Darryl aside for a second to talk about those he's led out of the Klan. But I told you that for every one success Darryl has had, he's had a lot of turmoil. He's had people, not only white supremacists call him a racist, but he's had people in his own race, in his own community, not race, his own community, the African American community, that hate him for what he does. They don't think he should do what he does. They hate racists, and they just want to crush racists, which is fascinating. Darryl takes the Abraham Lincoln, the Jesus Christ view that when you have made your enemy your friend, you have crushed your enemy, right? So that's something we can all get behind. But I want to talk to you about the Klan member for a second. Now, I'm getting to Rhett and Link, so hang there with me. But I want to talk to you about the Klan member first. Now, imagine this. Darryl witnesses to a Klan member. He loves him. He listens. He understands him. One day, the Klan member finally breaks down and sees Darryl as an equal. And he says to Darryl, what do you think about this? And that's when Darryl says, I know I can now talk to him about the ugliness of the racism that he's in bondage to, because now he sees me as a person. He's called me by my name, and he cares about my opinion. And if I would have started with that, if I would have started with, don't you know you're following an ugly ideology, they'd never listen to me. They'd, you know, do what all these other people do, slam the door in my face or spit at me or call me the N-word. But Darryl knows the timing to do that. Now, so this man comes out of the Klan, and we want to say, and they lived happily ever after. But now I want you to look behind the scenes for a second. That man was not an island. That man was part of a community. His ideology was shared, and it might have been shared with family members, with cousins, uncles. It might have been shared with his wife and kids. Might have been shared with people he works with. Virtually, you know, when you're an extreme racist like that, virtually everyone you know is either going to be put off by you or is going to share your views. So now imagine that this person who was drowning in ignorance and living a hate-filled life, imagine now if he arrives at a place where he says, I'm free, and this black man helped me see the light. And this black man is my brother. And I'm so glad I've broken free of the chains of ignorance and hate. Now, we hear that and we applaud, but you know who doesn't applaud? The guy's father and the guy's brother and his cousins and maybe the guy's boss and the guys on his bowling league, right? And maybe his next door neighbor. And now all they can hear is their loved one calling them ignorant and ugly. Now, his family and his friends embrace something that's ignorant and ugly. It's true. But when somebody leaves that the love doesn't end. He still loves his father, and he'd like his father to see the same sunset that he's seen, or the same sunrise, I should say, that he's seen now. And oftentimes, these men will go back and try and explain, hoping, okay, hoping that there will be some kind of conversion too, because they're excited and they're joy filled, and they're living in a dimension of life that they've never experienced before. It's like moving from a two-dimensional world. Or what's that great line that the motorcycle boy uses? What's that movie? Rumblefish. He's a colorblind fellow who's a heroin addict, and somebody asks him, "What's life like to you?" And he says, "Well, it's like a black and white TV with the color turned down, or a black and white TV with the sound turned down." So imagine you're living life like a black and white TV with the sound turned down. And all of a sudden, you open your eyes, and you're living in 8K resolution with surround sound. Right? Don't you want to share that with everyone you love? But he goes back to share that with everyone he loves, and they feel judged. And some of that love for him was really just love for what he used to think. It used to be that we wore the same jersey, right? And we thought the same way, and we laughed at the same jokes, and we had the same views, and we had the same goals. And now those things are at swords points. And so now really the test of love comes. Do they really love him for who he is? Or did they love him for who he was? And so it's not live happily ever after. A lot of times there's a struggle with these people for having chosen the truth and the light and unconditional love. And it takes humility to do this. But you know what it takes? Tremendous courage. It takes tremendous courage to walk away from something that's been really implanted in you since you've been young, and really has been, in some cases, a benefit to you in fellowship and relationship areas. Now, just because these people believe in something that's ignorant and hate-filled doesn't mean that they don't know how to love, and that there is not worth in them, because they too are God's children who are loved by God and desired by God. Of course, he doesn't desire them to walk in ignorance and hate, but they're still loved. As the prodigal was loved even when he was tipping over waitresses and pints in the bars, or, rolling around with the pigs in the sty, and the Father still loves him, and he desires something better for him. So, but the reason I tell you the story of the racist is because when a Christian deconverts, when a Christian goes through the process that Rhett and Link went through, a lot of times they're treated by family members as traitors and as people who betrayed who they are, and they're shunned or they're shamed. Sadly, Christians will use first shame. First, they'll try and shame the person and say, "Don't you know what you're doing to the family? What's happened to you? What's come over you? There's no hope in what you're doing. Don't you know what you're doing to your poor mother?" These kind of things. When shame doesn't work, because it won't, because when Harriet Tubman frees a slave and you're sitting on a porch drinking lemonade in Canada, you might go back to the plantation to try and get others off it, but you're not going back to live. You can't. You've seen a more beautiful way, right? So when shame doesn't work, shunning comes in. People think they have to enact tough love until you get back in line. There's a line a psychologist mentioned the other day, and he said, it was an article he wrote, and he said, "You want to see the world's biggest tantrum? It's not a child. It's not a child who didn't get a toy in the toy store. The world's biggest tantrum is thrown by the narcissist who realizes he's losing control of somebody else's mind." Sadly, a lot of our relationships are set up that way. In families, in churches, in communities, in tribes. So here's where we start. Now, I want to share with you. First of all, I have to come clean and tell you I'm a mythical beast. I love Rhett and Link. I loved Rhett and Link before I knew they were evangelical Christians. I love Rhett and Link even now that I heard they've left evangelical Christianity. I still love them. I love people, irrespective of what faith they're in or follow or their views on politics. And I thank my Lord for breaking my hard heart to be able to do that. But also, my daughter is a mythical beast. She loves Rhett and Link and Good Mythical Morning. If you don't know who they are, they're YouTubers. They're famous YouTubers. You want to show your shirt, Peyton? That's Peyton's Good Mythical Morning shirt. She actually had it. Did you have it signed? Oh, you wore it to the. My daughter. Yeah, my daughter actually met Rhett and Link. And if you don't know who they are, I'm going to show you Rhett and Link right now. This is Rhett and Link, and my son Connor's in the middle, and Lotso is holding my daughter just south of Connor. And so you have Rhett is the big bearded tall guy, and Link's tall too, but he's in the tan jacket. And I have another one.
Tan on top, green on the bottom.
Yeah, I've got another one of Peyton. She got to visit them when they were in town in Phoenix and got to meet her world heroes. And I love that she had that opportunity. But what I want to say to you now is that, let me close this. An article came out this week. Otherwise, I would never have known about it. And about their podcast called Ear Biscuits, where you can hear it, by the way. I think you should go to their podcast because they've done 4 episodes now on what people call a deconversion, where they're telling their testimony about leaving the faith. A spiritual deconstruction, it's called. It's like deprogramming from a cult. And that pains me to say that because I am a Christ follower myself. But the article is called, and it's from Pathos, written by, or shared on the blog, Godless and Dixie, written by Neil Carter, who also went through a deconstruction, was an evangelical Christian, went through a reconstruction. And he writes why Rhett and Link broke up with Jesus. And I'm just going to give you a little tad of what it says. It talks about how Rhett and Link met in way back in elementary school in North Carolina, and they've been friends ever since. But Neil says this. He writes this: I could barely stay in my car seat listening to Rhett's story. He was basically telling my story, along with the stories of 100 people I know who went through the same thought processes and the same emotional struggles. Only the dates and names were changed. I've heard these things described dozens of times by now, but never before by guys I know. My still believing daughters have been watching for years. So his daughters are still crying and big fans. Didn't know who they were until he heard of their deconversion. He says, he goes on to write, anticipating the response he would get for opening up about all this, Rhett addressed the no true Christian argument right off the bat. He said, I want to emphasize how big of a deal it was to me. It was a relationship. And I want to say that because I've noticed that when I tell my story, often people kind of conclude that I was never a true Christian. As far as I'm concerned, Jesus was as real to me as he possibly could be without physically manifesting himself in my presence. It was a relationship. We were in conversation. And he says, I hope you take the time to watch and listen to the show for yourself. I do too. I do too. But, you know, that is an oft-used remark to dismiss people who go through this. Okay. I don't know if we're back on, but it says we're back on. So here's where I left off, folks. In response to Josh Harris leaving the faith, a friend of mine once said to me, and it's something that's really stuck with me. He said, John, he said, sometimes a person needs to leave Christianity to find the true Christ. sometimes a person needs to leave Christianity to find the true Christ. So, I've met 1,000 people that have left Christianity, not because of Jesus really, but because of the church or because of some kind of crazy doctrine that they grew up with, right? And they've, gone to school or furthered their education and realized it was just bat crap craziness, what they believed. And so they reject all of Christianity because they think Christianity denies science. And young earth creation plays a big role in this, because to believe in young earth creation, you have to dismiss all of modern astronomy, all of modern geology, all of modern biology, all of modern anthropology and paleontology and embryology and plate tectonics, and over again. And what do you have to believe? You have to believe in a conspiracy that pretty much every scientist in the world is either evil or somehow under an evil spell by the devil or something, to try and lie about everything. So already you're in the DSM manual if that's where you are. And when you're taught that, and then the other one is verbal plenary inspiration, that really God wrote the Bible. So if God wrote the Bible, folks, there's not going to be any typos or mistakes. And so you grow up believing that. You grow up believing that man had nothing to do with it, which is not even what the Bible claims, or the scriptures, the collected scriptures that we call the Bible. You grow up believing that, and all of a sudden somebody shows you more than a typo. Somebody shows you a direct contradiction, which do exist. First and Second Kings are very different from First and Second Chronicles, and not just getting the math wrong. All right. And the Gospels do differ in areas. And I know our modern way of thinking goes a long way to dismissing those things or trying to harmonize those things, but some things can't be harmonized. You have to be a contortionist par excellence, and you have to, really dive into the deep end of the pool of blind faith to try and dismiss some of these things. But you get to a place, and here's what I wanted to say. C.S. Lewis told a story about sometimes we have to move further away from God to get closer to him. And he did it with this analogy. He said, imagine you're at the base of a mountain, and the village you want to go to is just above you on the mountain, but you can't scale it. So you have to take a path that winds around the mountain to finally get up to that village. Now, you're close to the village where you stand at the base of the mountain, but to actually get to the village, you have to move away from it, further away from it geographically in proximity, to finally get closer to it and arrive there. And I said this about Aaron Rodgers, and I'll say this about Rhett and Link, because I listened to their testimony, brothers and sisters, and it's heartbreaking to me, but it's authentic. It's real. They weren't superficial Christians or followers of Christ. Rhett's testimony, he's well aware of who Ravi Zacharias is. He can quote Ravi Zacharias. He's read his books. He's read The Language of God by Francis Collins. He was an evangelical missionary for a campus crusade. He grew up in the Bible Belt, and it was the life and breath of his life for better than 30 years, right? Growing up. And then he started to ask questions, and those questions weren't satisfied. As a matter of fact, he was shunned for wondering about these things, and he went through this process, and it was painful. But basically, now he says he feels so liberated and free, which is what happens when you break free of Plato's cave. You break free of ignorance. And you can't go back. If anything, you go back to be a missionary, but you can't go back to live in darkness thinking that the shadows are evil when you're outside of the cave on the beach taking in a glorious sunset. You can't go back and live in that. So why do I think Rhett and Link are closer to Jesus now that they've left Christianity? Whether they'd admit this or not, I believe it, because when you get to the crux of Rhett and Link's testimony, what they say is that the path they're on is ongoing. Rhett calls himself a hopeful agnostic. He says, I don't know, but I'm hopeful that it's true. because like Tolkien said, it's the story, the redemption of Christ is the story that every man wants to believe is true if it's told right. So Rhett says he's a hopeful agnostic. Why are they closer to Jesus for having left Christianity? Because the Christianity they were involved in was distorted. It was full of half-truths and outright lies. It was fortified with fear. It was fortified with fear and actually ignorance. And that's the reason I brought up the Darryl Davis story. Because leaving something like racism is a beautiful thing. It just, you have to realize that you've left a group behind. And what now is your relationship going to be to that group? It's going to change. And you're going to have a new group around you that's going to change. And you're going to be around people that you never would have associated with before. And you're going to find that love is bigger than the corner of the universe that you grew up in that taught you to be scared of everyone else, or to distrust everyone else, or to maybe even not love everyone else. And so why do I think they're closer to Jesus? For this reason. If you listen to their testimony, you find out that the reason that they've made this courageous step is because they were pursuing truth, and they found that their previous views weren't truthful. They didn't hold up to the truth. Now, I believe in a God that is truth. When the Bible says, or when the witnesses to Jesus say that we know that God is true, God says he's truth, and Jesus said, I am the truth. So if that's the case, God would encourage that person who's willing to risk and is courageous enough to risk all to pursue the truth. In other words, if God is truth, and truth is that big of a deal to God, which it is to the Christian God, then the pursuit of truth can never be a bad thing. That's first. The pursuit of truth can never be a bad thing, whether it's the atheist doing it or Billy Graham, right? If you're pursuing truth, you're actually pursuing God. And while you might be walking away from the village you're trying to get to, you actually are getting closer to it. And I think Rhett and Link are actually closer to Jesus than they ever were growing up in that Bible Belt, hellfire and brimstone background that believed, some crazy things about reality because they didn't know how to interpret scripture, or, they grew up in darkness. So are they closer to Jesus? Here's why I believe they're closer to Jesus. If you listen to their testimony, truth is the prime mover. That's important for all of us. We all should be truth seekers. What's the Latin phrase? Let justice reign, though the heavens fall. I think that's what they're doing. And they're authentic about it. You could tell they're authentic about it because they've actually gone through this process, and it was painful. It was painful. It tear-filled, and they lost relationships, and people said horrible things about them, still are, as witnessed by that Baptist pastor on my Facebook page. But and then what's the next thing? It takes humility to admit you were wrong, and it's a humility a lot of Christ followers don't have. Rhett in his testimony got to a place where I did about 4 years ago, and he said, he asked the humble question, what if I'm wrong? Because he admitted to something that was true of me. For a long period of time, I thought I was well-read. But I was really only well-read in people who thought just like I did. I only read other authors who just thought like me already. So it was confirmation bias. I wasn't building wisdom. I was building knowledge for confirmation bias, right? So it wasn't until I asked the question, what if I'm wrong, and considered other views and tested my views, that I really grew. And I think I grew in appreciation for God and appreciation for wisdom. Now, some people saw that and they thought, I'm going off the tracks like Rhett and Link, because I abandoned some of the beliefs that I had held all my life because they didn't hold up to scrutiny. And it takes courage to do that. I'm not blowing my own horn, but I'm saying it takes humility to ask the question, what if I'm wrong? And it really takes courage to change when you realize you've been wrong. It takes courage to walk away from people who you have relationships with, knowing that they're going to shame or shun you because of your worldview, because you don't think like them now about something. And that leads me to my third point of why they're closer to Jesus, because of truth and because of humility, which are all over the New Testament as far as what Christ followers should be shaped by. But the third one is unconditional love. The Apostle John, the one who leaned on Christ's chest at the Last Supper, right? The beloved disciple, the only male follower of his who stood in the shadow of the cross as his Lord was being crucified next to his mother, wrote that if you don't have love, agape, unconditional love that's not based on condition, if you don't have unconditional love for your brother, your neighbor, your enemy, you're not a true Christ follower. Now, he said that. I didn't. I'm not looking into anyone's heart. I don't claim I can do that. But the fruit of our Christ followerness, the fruit of our discipleship is not our knowledge. It's not our moral lives. It's not the fact that we don't look at porn or we don't smoke cigarettes or we don't drink alcohol. The fruit of the fact that we are in true fellowship with Christ, relationship with Christ, and we're truly trying to live by his dictates, is that we have love for one another. And that love overshadows difference in belief. It overshadows status of where we are. Oh, he's a Christian, he's not a Christian. Or he's a Democrat. Oh, could you believe it? Or he's one of those crazy Republicans. No, true unconditional love loves in spite of the ugliness or the difference of the object of our love. It's an intrinsic love that comes out of us really. I'll give the glory to God from God, because it takes God to love somebody that's so objectionable, but that's grace. And what you hear in Rhett and Link is that they are greater lovers now that they've left their little corner called Christianity, that they've pursued truth in a humble fashion, and they're greater lovers now. That tells me all I need to know. They're doing something right. So while a bunch of Christians right now are pearl clutching and doing their swan into the swooning couch and saying, oh, they were never a part of our family, I'm just sitting with the Father on the roof, awaiting their return. I'm anxious. I actually think I'm not. I don't think they went to Vegas to, get sauced up and have some fun. I actually think they're pursuing the truth, and they've gone around the mountain, and pretty soon they're going to be coming around the mountain. They're going to be closer. And so I anxiously await the return of my brother and my brother's Rhett and Link. And I think they're actually closer to God than a lot of people that they walked away from at the foot of that mountain, because they're embracing truth. They're doing it in a humble way, and their hearts are open to loving even the unlovable people that are cursing them right now, just as Aaron Rodgers was. So I just want to say to my fellow believers, pray about this, but listen first. Our first job, you're going to show your picture in a second. Our first job is to love. Now, we're all in Luke 15. We are. We're all either the lost son, or we're the elder brother in the field, or we're with the Father on the roof awaiting the return. And I want to sit at the Father's table. I want to be, as Rachel Held Evans said, look, Christianity should not be some kind of fortress where we're, defending and keeping people out. We should break down the walls, throw the doors open, and say, hey, we've got wine and bread. Come and feast with us. Come talk with us. That should be true Christianity. And that's the Christ I follow. So that's it for today. But it is a Peyton ads, and Peyton's been very patient. And I forgot to plug in the internet, folks. Sorry, with the wireless things. I hope you were able to fight through that. I'll correct it on the YouTube video later. But Peyton wanted to share her beautiful picture with you. Go ahead. Can you talk about it?
So this is a rainbow lake, and this is fish like, and this is a pretty black boat, and this is a pretty pink boat. This is a rainbow heart. This is a black heart.
And you want to say anything to Rhett and Link?
Hello.
All right. Thanks, folks. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps you. We're going to be crossing over a lot more lately now with the Sparrow's Call, where we're reaching out to people who think they have to walk away from the faith. And I think it's unnecessary and unneedful. But if you have a loved one who's going through this process, tune into our channel, the Sparrow's Call. We have advice for you. We're going to have great interviews with people who've been through this, who know how to navigate these waters. But basically, if you don't know what to do, listen and love. That's what Darryl Davis does. He listens, he loves, and he's patient, and it's a godly patience. So listen and love.
A picture of a Pop-Tart.
A picture of a Pop-Tart.
Tastes
All right.
better.
Hasta la vista, folks. God bless you.